So good morning. Today is the 5th day of Nisan and the 27th day of March. We're in the second reading of Parshas Tzav, the second portion in Vayikra in Leviticus. And we learn here, starting with verse 12, we're talking about Leviticus 6, verse 12, about the inaugural meal offering that the high priest brought. All the other priests also brought the same type of meal offering, but they only bring it once, meaning the high priest brings it every day of his life, half in the morning, half in the evening. And all the other priests, all the other Kohanim, the first time that they are of age, that they come to serve in the tabernacle or in the temple, they bring this meal offering. Now, the meal offerings are always very, very interesting, but there's a few details about them that are not so well known. First of all, in a meal offering, basically what does it mean? You take meal, meaning you take flour, the best type of flour, and you make it basically into a pancake. It's basically what it is. And it's made with oil and with something called levona. I have to see what levona is in English. Just a second. Levona is frankincense, and they put this on the beginning of the dough, meaning they shape the dough into like a pancake. They put some frankincense and oil on top, and then the priest does something very interesting. He takes a portion of the dough into his hand. He opens up his first finger, his thumb, and his pinky, and whatever is left inside is what's put on the altar. So this is like this act of taking this. It says that this is one of the more difficult acts that they did in the temple. The amount that's left inside his hand is called the kometz, this finger is called the kmitza. It's actually named after this act of grabbing something. It means to grab or to place in your hand, in the palm of your hand, in this way, and whatever falls off from the other sides goes back into the meal offering, and this part that was in his fingers, in his hand, goes on and is burnt on the altar. The rest of the meal offering is eaten by the priest or by the person who's bringing it, depending on the type of meal offering. But here we're talking about the meal offering of the high priest. So let's just read the verses and we'll see a few things that are very interesting. It says like this. God spoke to Moses saying, "This is the offering that Aaron and his sons shall offer to God on the occasion of his anointment or inauguration, 1/10 of an ephah of choice flour." This is the meal, basically. Ephah is a quantity. And as a regular meal offering, half of it in the morning and half of it in the evening. It shall be prepared with oil on a griddle. What is a griddle? A griddle is basically a flat pan, so that it's completely flat. This meal offering is completely flat. You shall bring it well soaked in oil, and offer it as a meal offering of baked slices of pleasing odor to Avaya. Now these words that they translate as baked slices is what we want to focus on. So in Hebrew the word is tufinei minchat pitim, which in itself is a very interesting word, and most people don't know what this word is, tufinei. So the Talmud talks about what does this word mean, and it means well baked, meaning that it was both first cooked and then baked, or according to another opinion, it was first baked and then cooked. The point of doing it this way was, and on the one hand, tufinei means that it should be plenty cooked, plenty baked. The problem with something that's baked is that you can't fold it. Think about a pancake. If you would bake the pancake in an oven, it would become brittle. And so if you would try to fold it over itself, you wouldn't be able to. The only time that we can, that's why we do pancakes in a pan, and we do it with some oil, and then it remains moist. And the moisture allows you to fold it over on itself. And that's the next word. What he says here, slices, is not exactly wrong, but the way that it's done is that this meal offering was taken and was folded on itself at the end in order to form two pieces that were still connected one to another. So he says slices, but they weren't really sliced. They were still connected. And then, if it was brittle, it wouldn't be a problem. You could fold it over, and they would break into two pieces, and then you'd have slices. But the point here is that it needs to be folded over and remain connected. And this is in the high priest's meal offering. If a regular person brings a meal offering, it's folded over once and then a second time. So you basically have four, as he calls them here, slices, but really they're all connected still. So that's why you had to retain the moisture. So this is the technical side of how you prepare the meal offering. The question is, why does it need to be folded over? That's a very interesting. I didn't have time to check if in other cultures there was such a thing that when you brought a meal offering, you had to fold it over. What's this idea of folding something over? Where did this even come from? So one of the interesting things is that anything that has, let's call it a connection to the divine, has both an inside and an outside. If something is only entirely face value, what you see is what you get. There's no deeper reality, no deeper sense, no deeper, call it dimension to this thing, then it's not connected to the divine. Let's give one example. In kosher animals, what are the signs of them being kosher? So the first thing is that they have to chew their cud. What does it mean that they chew their cud? It's not, they don't eat and that's it. They eat, they digest a little, and they bring it back up. What are they showing? They're showing that they have an inside. Stuff happens on the inside, and they bring it out again. And it goes back in, and it comes out. So you have a clear sense that there's both an inside and an outside. You look at their hooves, they're split. Why do they have to be split? So that you see that there is something, there's an inner dimension in between the fingers of the hoof. Yeah. If the hoof is not split, for instance, in a horse, the hoof is not split, it's just one piece. So what you see is that it only has an outside, there's no inside. Let's take another example of this. In the meal offering, when we fold it over, what we're doing is basically we're creating a space in between. So there's both an outside and an inside. Here's a little bit of history about Kabbalah, that there's a document that was well known even in the Arizal's time called the essay of the Malbush, it's called, of the garment. And what does it discuss? It discusses the various permutations of two letters that you can have in Hebrew. And it says that that's how the world was created. It was created by the various pairs that you can make. How many pairs can you make out of the Hebrew letters? So the formula is very simple. It's 22, since we have 22 letters, times 21, because we want to pair each letter with a different letter than itself, divided by 2. Or if you don't divide it by 2, then you get what this essay on the Malbush, on the garment, explains is 231 231 pairs front and back. In other words, let's try to imagine it. What it pictures is, it says, it's as if all the pairs of the letters were written on a square sheet of paper. And so there were 231 on top and 231 on bottom. What's the difference between the top and the bottom? The top and the bottom are actually the same, except if on the top it says Aleph base, then on the bottom it will say Bet Aleph. Aleph Gimel, on the bottom it will say Gimel Aleph. What's the idea? So it's called 231 gates, front and back. The image one should have in one's mind is that as I'm passing through a gate, on one side of the gate, it says, on one side of the doorway, it says Aleph. On the other side, it says Beis. When I walk in this direction, what I see is Aleph on my right and Bet on my left. Now, when I walk out, when I'm coming out, what I'll see is that the Bet is on my right and the Aleph is now on my left. So that's the Aleph, Bet, Bet, Aleph. What does this mean? That there's an inside and an outside. I can walk in and I can walk out. This idea is encapsulated in this meal offering, that I fold it over, just like the world of the world of the Malbush, the world of the garment, the different letters that God used in order to create the world were folded over in order to illustrate that the world has an inside and an outside. There's walking into something and there's walking out of something. That is the basis of something that is connected to godliness. Why? Because if you just take the world at face value, if all you see in the world is the external, then you can't see godliness. Godliness, by definition, to connect to godliness means that I have to become aware of the inner dimension of reality. The inner dimension of reality is where I encounter God. I don't encounter God necessarily on the outside. On the outside, it looks like it's just a physical world. But same thing with a person. If I only judge a person by their outside, and I don't have a realization that they have a soul, that they have an inside, then I haven't done them justice. I don't really understand the person. To begin to understand the person, I have to have an inside and an outside. So again, the meal offering had to be folded over, but not cut, because that way you have like a pocket. You have an inside and you have an outside, and that's saying that that's how the priest has to see the world, that everything has an inside and an outside. Incidentally, the largest section of the Arizal's Kabbalah in his book, the Eitz Chaim, is called Shar Pnimiyut V'Chitzoniut, the gate of the inside and the outside, of the internal and the external. And it's stressing that in order to have a true picture of what the world is like, you have to have an appreciation for there being more than meets the eye, and that there's a whole dimension that's underneath the surface. So I hope to see everyone tomorrow.
Thank you.